Hey guys, today I'm looking at Red Dead Redemption 2. And so, right out of the bat, I'm probably in the minority camp here, but I gotta say, I did not like this game. I don't know what it is compared to Red Dead 1, but this game, and I've said this about Rockstar's games, is that at a certain point, really starting with 5, they realized they couldn't do like a real life game more than what they had done without abstracting it. And so these games kind of became simulators at a certain point. And a lot of people say that this is one of the best games ever made. It's a total masterpiece, and on a technical level, that's absolutely totally true. Like the amount of detail in the graphical fidelity, the physics, how the whole world interacts, the people talk to you on the side of the road, all that stuff. From a technical perspective, Red Dead 2 is absolutely a masterpiece. It is really amazing what it can, pull off, and in its very simple scope and whatever. But in that sense, it feels more like a simulator. I mean, the joke of the time is that they came up with things like the horse balls shrink in the cold weather and all this stuff. But it still has the core gameplay. And so it's like, well, okay, what's missing here? What's different? And the difference, I think, is John Marston and Red Dead 1's its story and how it flowed and moved. And if I really think about it, I'm honest, Red Dead 1, it was able to have a very linear story that was kept inside an open world, while in this game, this feels more like the world is the story. It's a simulator, and so you kind of are expected, in a way, almost to role play. I mean, you have distinct characters like Arthur and Dutch, and they kind of lack the flair of John Marston. I thought, oh well, that's just me being nostalgic. But then in the intro sequence, you do have a segment with John Marston, and immediately I felt like the energy was back. I felt like there was something going on, and I was like, oh my god, this character has so much charisma that is impossible for me to not to like him. So there was that. So it's like, okay, so there was a benefit or a highlight to having John as like one of the characters. And then as soon as he was off screen, it's like, okay, we're back to these guys who are kind of like they're supposed to be a gang, but when the game opens up, it is such a weird tone. Like Red Dead 1's intro is John is like, oh, I implore you to do this and do that, and implore you, Bill, to, let go. And he's a rough, tough, rumbling cowboy. And it's kind of upbeat, it's fun, it's gritty, and it reflects John's character in the gameplay. But in this game, it opens up with this, we were on the trail of 1873, these black and white photos, and we had women and children with us that were on the trail, and we were going to freeze in the winter cold. And the whole tone of it, I thought, like, am I like reading some woman's, diary from the, the late 1800s and, the Wild West? It just felt so, like the word would be out of place. It just felt like the tone was very depressing, very dark, and like, why is a gang running with like a diverse cast of characters and a bunch of women and children? I thought these guys were a bunch of hardened, tough criminals. Like, I don't think they've put that life behind them yet. So to me, there was like a lot of cognitive dissonance there. And what was also very jarring, I would say the biggest issue, if I'm being honest with this, is the intro and the tutorials. Now, I have no problem with a game revealing tutorials to the players slightly. Okay, this is how you hunt, this is how you fish, this is how you shoot, this is how you ride a horse. I'm fine with all that stuff, but it's how you do it. And if you do it, and the way it's done in this game is very I would say almost amateurish, where it's very blatant and direct. Like, okay, we're loading a different part of the map. In Red Dead 1, you kind of taught you everything, in the game itself, and you didn't jump around time frames or places to load certain areas or whatever, because you naturally just progress through the world like a bunch of levels. And in this case, it's like, okay, we're going to load a whole new section now so you can learn how to hunt and shoot this rabbit. And it feels like a series of short stories and, what would you say? A bunch of short stories. And yeah, like specifically, like it's like saying, without the game saying this is our specific tutorial level, like it's supposed to be very in-depth. It's supposed to be very non-blatant in how it does this, but it does not do that. It's very, very, it does not care. And I find it to be very jarring and very transparent. Like when you, and like suddenly, okay, we're robbing a train now. We're like, it feels like I'm going down a list and checking a bunch of boxes. And you'd say, well, why is that a problem? You know, you're doing all the cowboy things that you're expected to do, that cowboys did. And I mean, my retort is that it's stereotypical. And it's stereotypical, and that's fine if you're playing something that is a simulator, that it's supposed to simulate this, but it has no central soul or character. John Marston is the soul and character of the first game. It's the reason why you play that cowboy game versus any other cowboy game, is that it has a distinct story, a distinct tone, and a distinct main character to carry that whole process forward. And so then it calls into question, well, I mean, Arthur, he's like an okay character. Dutch is an okay-ish character. But none of them hold a candle to John. And the fact that he's in this game shows you the contrast between those characters. Arthur's kind of like a big, dumb, lovable oaf. I mean, honestly, I kind of like Arthur, but there's not a lot to his character. He's kind of very, well, I'm going to do whatever Dutch says, and that's how it's going to be. And Dutch is, very hell-bent on a lot of things. He's very direct. He's the more interesting character for sure. But he's also kind of just, I don't know, they're trying to like sympathize him or make him, like the first scene you see of Dutch, he's like, all right, get the women and children to safety and whatever. It's like, okay, obviously this guy has done or is going to do a lot of bad stuff if you're doing it this hard, essentially. And yeah, I just felt like the game and the story, it just did not justify the world. And once you finally get out into the world and past this tutorial level, the world itself is, I mean, it looks beautiful. I mean, again, it's one of the best looking games, amazing environments, but it feels like there's nothing in it to do. I mean, you got to ride into town, or you got to, find someone or make your own, fun, which is fine. Like tie some random person to the rail tracks. I mean, you could do that in Red Dead 1. But here it felt like you're supposed to, I don't know, role play in this cowboy simulator. It felt like this could have been called, the cowboy game instead of Red Dead 2, because it felt like there was a whole story, continuation, a theme, an idea, and I just never got that vibe. And so I roamed around, I found some guy, shot him, checked out the water physics, and it's like, wow, this is cool, this is neat, this is nifty. Oh, I can take the saddle off my horse, I can lay it down, I can put store stuff in there. Wow, this is really neat. But I did not feel the grip or the hook of the story or the characters pull me forward. I literally did not care, and it's one of the few times I've dropped a game, especially a game like this, which is 10 out of 10, super hyped, and everyone agrees, it's one of the best games ever made. And when I sit down to play it, it washes over me. There's nothing about it that grips me. It's just not interesting. There are other games where it's like Far Cry 5, like it immediately pulls you in. You're immediately invested in solving this problem, solving the the motivations of the character of this crazy cult, and all the little rewards and whatever. And it's kind of a similar. And here, I just don't feel that at all. Like, it's very impressive what they've done, and they've created a very intense. They've created a very impressive weather system, a very cool kind of setup and reinterpretation of this era. But if I'm looking back at it honestly, I really did not enjoy or imagine myself to enjoy this game. It really is. It's fine if it's a sim, but it's not a sim. It's something. It was supposed to be something, I think, much more than that, and it wasn't. And it was really based on the idea of, again, the story and the character of John Marston. And here it just does not live up to it. And again, I had to drop it. So I mean, that's pretty much all I got to say about this game for now. Again, the gunplay is serviceable. Everything else is fine. I mean, all the technical aspects of it, the physics and the graphics are absolutely, peak 10 out of 10. But to just illustrate this point, there's a point where in the first chapter, you get into a bar fight, and it's like kind of like, okay, check the box, bar fight, and everyone has a rough and tumble time. And Dutch, and you beat the hell out of the shop owner basically in the mud outside, and the mud and the graphics and the slipping around were honestly, again, technically amazing. It's a technical feat, but at the end of the day, what happens because of that bar fight? If it was Red Dead 1, it would be like, oh, now you got a bounty on your head, you got to lay low. There's like a new mission that comes to you. And it feels like instead you're searching out things in the world to do rather than the world coming to you. And so Dutch comes up to you and he basically says, all right, Arthur, get yourself cleaned up. We got work to do. And that whole sort of segment, that whole aspect and that whole part of this giant fight didn't mean anything. Like, it happened, but it didn't have any consequences to the overall tone of the game. So this game lets you do all the normal, cowboy stuff. Frankly, I think they should have called it something like Red Dead Resurrection instead of Red Dead 2, because this is not a sequel to Red Dead. It's a completely different game, a completely different tone, and it's something that I'm just not into. It's like if you were saying, if you like Ace Combat, you're going to enjoy Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's like, no, they're two very different games. Anyway, that I can see that they put a lot of money into it and a lot of marketing money for sure. Anyway, that's pretty much all I got to say about this. And yeah, that's it. Bye.